Welcome into your Wednesday, March 19th version. Browns Film Breakdown. Jake Burns. Get a little time with Andrew Spade today. Loving it. Can't wait to talk about everything around. Basically, it's just rumors. We're getting a bunch of rumors nonstop and really conjecture about how this team improves. We're going to dig into all those details. We have everything you need based on what we've heard leading up to the time and day you're listening to this. We have a bunch of mock drafts we're going to get to. We want to talk about some positions that are still pressing to us. Before we do so, however you're listening to this podcast, Apple, Spotify, whatever, 5 stars would be greatly appreciated. If you're on YouTube checking out the free portion of this, a like, a subscription would also be very, very nice of you. We would appreciate any of that support and coming over, supporting the website where we have your daily newsletters, film breakdowns, and obviously podcasts, keeping that moving. And our founding members, who we really appreciate, get that free Browns Film Breakdown hat and obviously a chance to talk Browns all day, every day with the group of us from Browns Film Breakdown. So support the site. If you have not done so, we greatly appreciate any of that and all of that is provided. So Andrew, I welcome you in, and I spent yesterday's podcast riffing basically on how annoyed I am that Aaron Rodgers is holding up the league. And I know that you have a speciality here with Aaron Rodgers disdain, so I will let you go with it. But I mean, listen, it's another day in. We're recording this, on Tuesday. The league is still at a standstill. There are 7 of the top 50 guys in the league that haven't done anything and haven't gone anywhere. And it feels like, like Jeff Okudah and some ticky-tacky signings are happening, but the league itself to make these last dominoes fall, like we haven't heard any Amari Cooper or Stephon Diggs noise, period. Some of these moves that are sort of waiting to be made are hinging on what some teams trying to compete are doing at the quarterback position, the Browns included. And here we are, amazingly annoyed about the situation that's at hand.
Yeah, the NFL is like this sometimes, right? You get these bursts of activity. Last week or so has been kind of nonstop and then really slowed down over the weekend and just has not picked back up as the week has started. And it's hard to predict where this stuff goes, except that you get these weird little waiting game things. And the fact that one of them is, about a 41-year-old quarterback who's probably 3 years off of his prime, who, I mean, it's not like the Jets were a talent-free football team last year and they didn't have a winning record and he played every game for them. So like, what are we doing here? This just doesn't make any sense that he can hold this level of leverage, I guess, a little bit of a tongue twister there. Like, it shouldn't happen, right? I mean, this just doesn't exist for Russell Wilson's not going to hold the market up like this. If he takes time to make a decision, nobody else is going to do that. The fact that Rodgers can do this is just such a testament to the gap in perception, even within the league, of who he is and who he really is as a player.
No, it is. And you said it right. I think maybe it's the Vikings that are he's like told the Vikings, from what we are led to believe, he would be most interested in going there. Who wouldn't be? I mean, you get Aaron Jones and Jefferson and Addison. It's a whole bunch of weapons, but they seem to be making some auxiliary moves and they're not totally decided. And I guess I would feel like, I understand he's coming off a major injury to an extent here, but does this tell a story about J.J. McCarthy and their lack of sort of faith that they can go into a season with him as the guy playing football for them? I don't know. It's hard to look into that too far, but it feels like Rodgers is waiting on the Vikings. You tell me if I'm wrong, Andrew. I don't know. You maybe been following along with it too, but it's Vikings. He wants to go there. They don't know if they're going to take another quarterback. And then it's maybe Pittsburgh or the Giants he goes to from there. But it does feel like they're one team, as we saw Jameis go to New York yesterday, is like one. I mean, again, it's one domino. It's really, like you said, it's really annoying. It just is stopping so much of the movement that needs to happen. I mean, it's the 18th we're recording this. It's like a month out from the draft. I also saw a piece of information that this is the closest we've been to the draft since 1993 without any first round pick movement. So this is like the entire league is kind of sitting very still right now, which it's almost a little strange how quiet things are at this point. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I just think it's tough when you get conditioned to the league always making news, and then you have to go a few days without there being news, and it becomes this waiting game, right? And it's very hard to, as we just learned with the Myles Garrett situation, right? You don't want to overreact to the absence of certainty. And the Garrett thing was a reminder that as sure as you are that something is going to happen, something else can happen because it just takes a different decision to be made by the player. So it's like with the Rodgers thing, like he's told the Vikings what he thinks, and I guess that's holding things up, and he's trying to will the Vikings into being interested in him or something like that. But he's such a fickle dude that he could just change his mind tomorrow and sign with Pittsburgh, and then it all changes. But until then, we're kind of left just kind of standing around here, and it makes this stuff very hard to talk about. So I think, my overall feeling is just like I honestly kind of tune it out because there's levels of like off-season stuff that I find interesting. Like I mean, truly, what the Steelers decide to do at quarterback for them is so interesting to me because it's a team that had a good season last year with Russell Wilson, but you felt like that put a pretty firm ceiling on what they could be. I don't know how much Aaron Rodgers would change that math if he was the quarterback that ended up there. I would feel better about him than Wilson, I think, just in terms of in my rankings of where I think they are. That is interesting to me, what happens with the Steelers, but it all being held hostage by this one will they, won't they thing with the Vikings is just so strange to me. And Jake, from the Vikings perspective, it really makes no sense to me. Like, why, on what basis would they be interested in that? Like, what sense does that make?
Yeah, it's such a different style, personality, everything. Sam Darnold to Rodgers, who just I don't know how I would be open to some of the other quarterbacks visiting places right now before I would Rodgers with their situation with McCarthy sort of trying to establish himself back as taking the reins of the franchise. I'm with you. None of where we're at. You made a good point pre-record here where you talked about the feeling of like, will they, won't they trade Mayfield? What will they get for him a few years back? It's kind of the same thing, although we shouldn't be doing this sort of this close to the most important really 3 weeks, 4 weeks of the NFL's offseason, and especially considering how many of the top 10 guys are out there. It's a very weird spot right now. That's for certain. I want to put up real quick and have a conversation with you about the Browns current depth chart, because you and I talk about this, and it's very well known that Andrew Berry is views it as an expansion team. He wants to have everything sort of in a place that he doesn't feel required to make a selection of any kind in the draft other than this is the player we think is best. But I think they're challenging that notion a little bit. So let's throw up the offense first. All right, Andrew. So we're looking at offense, and what I started thinking about how Andrew Berry's going about this is there's two ways to think of it. This is the first draft capital draft they've had, really a large influx of picks in what now? So this is the fourth year removed from that opportunity, 2021. So there is a world where they're not pressing and they know they can make some selections and they're going to lean into that a little bit. But there's also a world where I don't really feel comfortable with certain things. As you look at this group, I mean, me personally, 4 weeks leading up to the draft, there's two positions that stand out to me outside of the obvious at quarterback that we just know something has to happen. But the running back situation and I think the tight end situation stand out above all else. I think they have to do something there of some kind. And I put up a video that included who I think the Browns, like 3 intriguing free agents, and Nick Chubb is just there. I feels like Nick is returning at some point, but I think those are the two positions offensively as I look at things that I'm like, I don't even feel comfortable. You can't run those out there at an NFL football field at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's kind of, I guess the way that I would put it, looking at the offensive depth chart, is there's like areas of the offensive depth chart where you maybe disagree with the way that the front office has evaluated themselves and what they need. And then there's other areas where you say like, well, you just don't have the guys, right? And I think your point about running back and tight end are well taken. But I would say that probably from a running back perspective, that's one where I think you and I differ pretty strongly on the evaluation of the players in the room. Like think they could go into the draft with Ford and Strong as their only two running backs. But that wouldn't shock me just because of how much trust they've shown in Jerome Ford since drafting him. Whereas at tight end, as you said, you really have to add somebody. You can't even pretend, unless you want to be starting a rookie lower round pick. You can't really pretend that that's sufficient to have Blake Whiteheart as your second tight end. So, when I look at the offensive depth chart, I say, like, I am not, I have low expectations for the offensive line based on how they performed last year. I think they're definitely a wide receiver short. And then I think like you said, the quarterback is obvious. It's a situation, Jake, where they have a ton of holes, and I think, could stand to add talent everywhere, but obviously they don't have the luxury of doing that based on the other restrictions that they have. But I think the big picture here is that you and I, we talked last week about going position by position. Like, you could add somebody at running back. You could definitely add somebody at tight end. You could add a wide receiver.
Right.
And they continue to not do that. At a certain point, you start to say, well, if they haven't by now, they don't intend to, other than maybe a guy who is, what you would say kind of like an edge of the roster guy that maybe might not even survive cuts. But in terms of players that they expect to be contributors for them, it feels to me like they might, other than with the exception of maybe a veteran tight end, maybe between now and the draft, maybe not until the summer, I feel like this might be, other than obviously quarterback, the depth chart that we see going into week 1.
Yeah, adding, some draft picks into the fold here, but even when you're talking guys outside of your first 2 selections, third round guys, it's hard to even expect them to come in and make some kind of impact. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I could pick one of those positions that I would just really like them to add someone competent, it certainly feels like tight end, because the running back depth in the draft, I think you're right about that. Do I feel comfortable with Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford? No, but I certainly think there's opportunity within the draft to get the right player. But I would prefer, especially with the learning curve at tight end, I think that's the one spot. Are you maybe leaning more toward wanting another wide receiver?
No, I think you're right about a tight end. I mean, I don't know what the obvious fit is there. That's a guy that really moves the needle, other than like Tyler Conklin, who's probably out of their price range.
Yeah.
It's an area where you kind of hope maybe they could work out a trade for Michael Mayer. I mean, I know that was out there. Maybe that resurfaces closer to the draft, because that's oftentimes when player for pick swaps kind of have to come together. And the Raiders are obviously, I think probably moving in a different direction. That to me would be the solution, would be like buying low on somebody who's on another roster that they don't like.
Yeah.
And look, maybe they feel like they've got that kind of in their back pocket as they head towards the draft, and that explains the lack of action. But I just think, to me, this feels a lot like other seasons where we've expected them to be more. I remember we had this conversation last offseason. We expected them to be a little more aggressive than they were in free agency. And it turned out that they really just kind of trusted their evaluations of the roster overall. And I think we know how that turned out. So my overall, takeaway from this is that they are betting that the talent improves because the system improves. And I understand the logic of that, and arguably the need to believe that, but I don't believe it as much as they do.
It's a risky game that, like you said, they played it last year, did not turn out very well for them. And wide receiver, I can sort of stomach some of that. I can stomach it because they're not going to play a third guy as often. But yeah, I mean, you want to lean into using more tight ends, then they better be at least talented enough to outpace someone like Mike Woods or, Jamari Thrash. I mean, would you rather have Blake Whiteheart on the field or those guys? I mean, that's the question you're running into at that point. So I mean, I can't say I would be mouth agape stunned if they didn't add something offensively to some of their skill group. But yeah, I mean, Michael Mayer feels like that'd be such a great fit, but it's ultimately what they're willing to, the Raiders asking price for something like that. Defensively, it's obviously a group that feels better, more talent, just natural talent. I think the Malik Collins signing was exactly what they needed. Isaiah McGuire took steps. This group, if Mike Hall comes back, Alex Wright comes back healthy, you're feeling much better about it. And obviously some of the additions in place there, but one position group stands out to me pretty heavily. And if I'm looking, and really I'm like forced to add somebody to one position group on both sides, if we're picking tight end on the other side, to me, it's just like it's got to be a linebacker. The Jordan Hicks thing, uneven injuries last year. They like him a lot. I get it. Just, what are we talking about? Age, veteran, all of that stuff, dealing with what he dealt with last year. We don't know anything about JOK. I get they brought back Devin Bush. I understand that. And I understand Diabate had moments early in the season, middle of the season, but his late season performance was so uneven. I understand you also drafted Bookie Watson, but it smells to me like, I pointed out, Eric Kendricks would just be such a welcome addition and pass coverage linebacker. Just give them some, listen, if I was told today JOK is fine, he's going to play, everything's good, I'd feel totally different. But when you're talking about it's JOK's out, so you're talking about Jordan Hicks, Diabate, Devin Bush, and it's like that group is a problem. Like when you're putting the pressure that they do on their linebackers to fix and solve and do all these things, that doesn't make me feel good. Do I want, like, I listen, me, Andrew, Mike Hilton was on the video yesterday. I would love to add him, but the pressure of ranking those two, I just feel like linebacker is a group that leaves me with more mystery. And I also don't like forcing picks at that position because you didn't address it, et cetera, et cetera. So like, that's where I'm leaning, looking at this group, if I identify one group, but perhaps you feel like there's just an ultimate need to move off Greg Newsome. I would love to move off Greg Newsome and go Hilton. That just seems like such an easy, great upgrade and helps them financially. But sometimes that's wishful thinking, or maybe a little easier said than done, with some team being like, you know what, we'll take that player at that price point. That's tricky.
Yeah, I there's no reason for me to expect that Newsome is going to get traded for anything, because I think the Browns value him more than other teams do. It's the same thing we saw last season. Nothing materialized there because they probably want a day 2 pick for him, and teams are saying that's not the player that we've seen on film. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, that's another stalemate that feels a lot like situations that we've seen in the past where they're just tied to a value of the player that doesn't exist around the league. I would say secondary, Jake, primarily because you're going to play 5 secondary players and you're going to play 2 linebackers. And I like Hicks, and I think you can, between Bush and the other guys you mentioned, you can probably survive with the other position. Of the secondary players, I trust 2 of the 5. I trust Ward and I trust Delpit. Yeah. So I'm worried about free safety. I don't think, to me, Ronnie Hickman starting is I don't love that. And then I don't trust Newsome or Emerson based on what happened last year. So with the way that the Browns play defense, with what the amount you kind of said it with the linebackers, the same thing with the secondary. They put a ton of pressure on those guys back there to be where they're supposed to be, to play in phase, all those things. And I don't think that we've seen enough from these guys to think that they can do it reliably. So I would definitely prioritize another addition in the secondary. It's something I've talked about for a while, needing another veteran back there, because I don't think Denzel Ward is the type of, as much as you, I mean, look, is this a little bit of a refrain right now with the Browns defense? As much as you would like their best players to be their best leaders, you're maybe not in a situation where the guys that you're paying the most are the best leaders on your team. That's a tough pill to swallow for sure. But I think that doesn't mean that you couldn't find somebody to help out in the same way that I think as Darius Smith, right, helped the defensive line room, for a while. And I think other guys had been in there and tried to do that. I think the same thing could be true for the secondary. So I would actually prioritize, a veteran presence in the secondary, maybe ahead of arguably anything that they could do right now. There are free agent safeties available, right? It's not, you're not going to break the bank on a free agent safety who's a veteran who can communicate and get people lined up. And you got to remember that Rodney McLeod is not on this team this year. He's retired. So if you're subtracting him, and maybe you don't have JOK out there communicating on the back 7, I just don't think that's I don't think we're going to be pleased with how that looks when you do all that math.
Yeah, you've swayed me. I mean, a linebacker stuff makes me nervous at the front line because I just don't, without JOK, there's not a dude, period, to me. But no, you're right. There's more to fill back there on a consistent basis. And, you start to look at the things you need on offense in the draft, and you think about those early picks, and then you're like, well, they need a safety too. Well, where are you slotting that player in? Then you're slotting a fringe top 100 player, and you start to get really nervous about that because you need those picks offensively based on the, comparing those two sides of the football next to each other. It's quite clear which one lacks just core talent versus the other, right? So yeah, I think a veteran safety and a veteran nickel would go a long way. It would just go a long way for making you feel better about a secondary that, like you said, it's going to have a lot of pressure on it. So yeah, that's what we wanted to do, was really look at what spots, as we're in this holding pattern, we still just like, hey man, you need to do something. And I think those are the spots that we wanted to identify, and hopefully we see some traction. Still nothing so far today on some movement. And I mean, again, I'm talking, this is not just like, oh, the Browns aren't doing it. The league itself, there was a little bit of the domino of the Bengals making the choice to pay those guys, and there's some Trey Hendrickson stuff that they'll either work out or they won't. But crunch time is going to happen, and we're probably just going to see a rush of things that happen really quickly once one thing breaks loose, and we'll be ready to talk about it. But yeah, a little bit of tight end, a little bit of secondary, a little bit of linebacker would be a long way to make you feel better about this. We're going to take a break, come back from break. We're going to talk about the draft. 2 important mock drafts have come out that we just want to talk about, who the Browns are sort of being slotted to take and where all of this is moving. So that's going to be after the break. If you're on the free side of the podcast, either on YouTube or on the website or on whatever podcast platform you're listening, make sure to join us. You'll unlock the podcast every day in the Substack app. You get that delivered to you. You can do audio form, video form, whatever you so choose. We would appreciate you doing that. So we will catch you tomorrow if you're on the free side. If you are a supporter of the website, stick around. We'll be right back.